Hi, I'm Tim May, and I'm moderating this series of 10 conversations on expressive photography with Phil Douglas. Phil understands the nature of expressive photography as well as anyone I know. For 35 years, he directed the Douglas Visual Workshops, and he helped more than 10,000 communications professionals make and use photographs to express ideas, tell stories, and convey meaning. Phil says he's learned a great deal from those workshop participants over the years, and he also enjoys learning from the tens of thousands of images he's made in more than 60 countries. I first met Phil at Santa Fe Workshops in 2004, and we went on to photograph together across North America, as well as in Europe, Asia, Africa, and South America. Both Phil and I have displayed our images on various photographic websites, and Phil has put together a 5,000 image cyberbook on expressive photography at pbase.com. You can find the link to that cyberbook in the notes below. It has drawn more than 10 million visitors since he started in 2003. They have left more than 12,000 comments under his pictures, and Phil has answered each one of them. When the pandemic brought Zoom into our lives, I asked Phil to bring that cyberbook to life in this set of 10 conversations on expressive photography, and now he has. Enjoy. What are we talking about today, Phil?
Tim, we're talking about vantage point. Your camera position determines what you say. The vantage point is where you choose to stand, sit, climb, wherever you want to go with your camera. It's one of three choices we have in space. We have frame, we have detail, and we have vantage point.
And the other two we've spoken about in other conversations.
Yes, we have. Let's look at vantage point from the standpoint of where we are. I remember this, we were coming back from a trip in Utah or Montana, you and I, and we were driving along, and suddenly there was this herd of cattle coming up the street. And we obviously stopped the car. We had to stop the car to let them pass. And I jumped out and I threw myself on the pavement. Back then I could still throw myself around. And I was lying down on the pavement to get this shot. Well, maybe not lying down, but very close to lying down. Maybe a very low kneel. And when you do this, the picture comes to life. That double line leads the eye right in and over the bump, and then you're there. And you get the feeling that you are about to be trampled. It brings you into the image. Tim, do you have anything to say about this?
No, I wonder if the low vantage point creates the sense of ominousness. It has a very ominous feel.
Dangerous.
Right.
Get out of my way. We were shooting together in, let's see, this was a lake in...
it's near Tule Lake.
Yeah, it was Tule Lake.
Okay.
Thank you for reminding me the name of the lake. Tule Lake is in Northern California, and it was Moonrise. And instead of simply framing the scene as a moonrise, I moved, and this is changing my vantage point, to behind a tree, a dead tree. And those two branches on the top reminded me of open arms and hands reaching out to gather in the moon. So by changing my camera position, I move. And in moving, I make the subject, the tree, enter the frame. and embrace the moonrise. Anything to add to this?
Well, to me too, there's this connection with the moon and ghostliness and so forth. And it feels like this skeleton opening up the arms to accept the moon.
Skeleton. I was photographing butterflies in a place called Butterfly World here in Phoenix, where I live. And I quickly found that if you're photographing a butterfly, you have to move very close to the butterfly. Well, that's changing your vantage point. You can't stand 10 feet away and shoot from shoulder high and expect to get a picture of a butterfly. You must move in. Now, vantage point can be determined physically by moving with the camera and also optically by zooming out with a telephoto zoom lens. You can greatly change the vantage point, but you're doing it optically. The camera position changes. And in this case, when I move in very close, you not only see the detail on the wings of the butterfly, but you also see the moisture on the leaves where the butterfly feeds. This room is constantly in mist and spray, and you get kind of damp yourself when you're making the pictures here. Some of the people with me found the vantage point to be at times unnerving because the butterflies would come and sit on their cameras or sit on their heads looking for a new meal or whatever it is they're looking for.
A model release.
A what?
A model release.
A model release. We were in, I believe it was somewhere in China.
I think this is Pingyao.
Pingyao, China. And it was a Confucian temple. And I put the statue of Confucius, I moved in. I took off its head. I moved in and I focused on 3 sticks of incense burning in front of it. And you can see the cover of the incense burning to reveal the ash inside and the smoke coming out of it. And you would not see that detail unless you were this close to it. And also, by moving very close to the incense as my subject, I put the statue of Confucius out of focus. So it becomes a soft background. If it was sharp, it would be competing with the detail in the foreground. Anything to add to this?
Well, one of the things that I thought about as you were talking about the idea of vantage point is that one of the joys of digital is that it gives us the opportunity without having to worry about spending film to experiment with a collection of vantage points around the same subject.
And that's what we call working a picture.
Right.
Working a picture. We shoot many, many frames. It doesn't cost us anything in terms of money. It costs maybe in time. And time in making the photograph and also time in editing the photograph, because many times you come back with 50 or 100 pictures of the same thing made at different moments in time, which is another module, and made in different places in space. This elephant is very close to me. It's probably maybe 15 feet away. And the reason why I can photograph it with great confidence is that I'm inside of a Land Rover shooting through a hatch in the top of the roof. So the elephant won't bother you, isn't afraid of you because it's used to tourists coming by in these strange contraptions. But it gives you a very uncomfortable feeling of menace. And the vantage point is very close because of the position of the truck, which is only 15 feet away from the elephant. you know, we were waiting, we were not moving, and the elephant was moving around and came within 15 feet of us. This was in Zambia, in southern Africa, in the South Luangwa National Park Game Reserve. And the beauty of it was that being so close, we could get detail in. Look at the textures of this elephant, its ears, its trunk, its eyelashes, the strands of nutrition that is now taking in at this moment are all revealed at this close a vantage point. Tim, you want to add anything to this?
Well, I find myself thinking a little bit too about frame, and that basically you've essentially filled the frame with the elephant. But the other thing, and I'm not sure, this is something I've never asked you about, but I have kind of a philosophy that if you can't get the whole in, it's best to crop out or frame out. I think it's a nice, better word than crop. So that all the parts are, like if you'd been able to show the whole trunk, then I would have framed it to cut out part of the trunk, because most of the body of the elephant is out of the frame, or cut off by the frame. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. We discussed this in our module on frame,
Right.
which, as I said earlier, is one of the three choices that we are dealing with in terms of space. As a photographer, you're dealing with what you include or exclude in the frame. The frame is an editor. And of course, the frame is also a factor when you choose in post-processing to crop an image, you're creating a new frame for it.
Right.
And those are choices in space that you're making when you crop a picture. And detail, the detail you include, the detail you take out, the detail you see, the detail you don't see. That is a choice in space, but it's all determined by vantage point, where you are with your camera, and then where you choose to be if you crop it later. Correct?
Okay. Right.
I was in Zagreb, not Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia, Croatia, and the sun was rising in the main square, and you have this fellow with the sword. I use this picture in another module where I shoot him through an array of balloons, one of them being Bugs Bunny, and he's about to puncture the balloon
Right.
with his sword. Remember that shot?
I remember that shot, and I don't think it's in the prologue. I don't remember which one it's in.
Well, if you guys go through all 10 conversations with us, you will find that picture of this guy and the balloons. But this was made a few minutes later from another vantage point. This is from the side, and I get the sun coming up, and it's flooding the area with light. But I make him a completely dark, silhouetted against the golden sky. I'm abstracting him. And of course, I have a whole module on abstraction. And one of the great aspects of abstraction is it takes out information and simplifies the image. And you can see a lot of the information, what he looks like, with the surface of the statue, all of its texture, its color, the building behind him and the detail in the building. It's all taken out by my choice of vantage point, which is shooting into the sun. And of course, light is involved here too. And I have a whole module on light. So all 10 of these conversations are really interconnected, because everything we do in photography is interconnected.
Well, and oops, back. First of all, you know how I am about detail. The birds on the lamp got to me.
Oh, yes, the little bird on the lamp. I forgot about him.
But the thing that I'm also wanting to remember here is that when you talk about the Bugs Bunny image, it's not like you choose one vantage point, but when you're working a photo, you you've already talked, at least with these two images, of changing your vantage point while you're there. It's not like you get on top of the steps and you stay there. You go down the steps, you move to the front, you move to the balloons, you move vantage point while you're out in the field, and it's not a singular choice.
Yes, you know, years ago I attended a workshop, and the former director of photography for the National Geographic was speaking, Bob Gilka, and he said that he said it's interesting how all amateur photographers take the same vantage point, 10 feet away from the subject with the camera held at shoulder high. That's the standard vantage point, he said. But when we hire or make an arrangement with a photographer to shoot a story for the Geographic, the first thing we do is look at his or her contact sheets and check to see if they bend, if they will go around behind the subject, if they shoot it from above, from below, if they're exploring the subject with vantage point, because that tells us we have a skilled photographer in sight.
Well, and I remember our class at Santa Fe Workshop from Nevada Weir, when she was still using slides, and she would say, she'd show a slide and say, now this is a decent picture, click. But see what happens when I got down and took the picture from below? That's a lesson I still remember.
And what did she do? She changed her vantage point.
She squatted down and took the picture up.
That's right, that's right. And it's interesting that as the years go on and take its toll on our bodies, and I'm now 86 years old, and I began as a photographer back in, you know, really seriously shooting back in my 30s. And it was no impediment for me to change my vantage point. Today, with my arthritic knees, it's very difficult to bend down. And so I make sure that I have a camera that has a fold-out viewfinder on it, so I can lower it down between my legs and look down into it and get the same position as if I were kneeling.
Right.
You and I were in Bodie together. Bodie is a wonderful state park in Western California on the
Eastern California.
Eastern, right, Eastern. I have my directions crossed here. It's on the eastern slope of the Sierra Nevadas. And it's an abandoned town, basically, that is frozen in time. And it is really, really a fantastic place for photography. And there's this old car. This is probably the most famous car in the park there, because everybody with a camera shoots it. And most people shoot it from the side or the front. Very few people will crop out most of the car and raise their camera up over their head and point it down. Of course, a photographer who is there for the whole day and has more equipment with him or her will bring a step ladder, and they'll climb up on the step ladder and shoot down. I didn't have that luxury. And when I do, what happens to this old car is that it is relating to the weeds around it. The weeds around it are peripheral when you shoot it from shoulder high. But when you shoot, when you bring the camera up and shoot down on it, you see the weeds are enveloping it. They grow up around the grill. The pattern of the weeds here embrace the fenders. And that's what makes this picture. The color of the weeds is repeated in the color of the old grill, the old brass grill. And the form of the picture, the rounded nature of the fenders, and the whole composition of the image is rooted, that's a good word, rooted in the plant life around it. Tim?
It's like it's driving through history.
Yes, it is. Driving through time.
Right.
Yes. And the fact that the weeds happen to be dormant or dead at this time of year, well, this car is dormant as well.
Mm-hmm.
I made this image while cramped in a seat in the Kobe Kyoto Express in Japan. we were taking a cruise through the Orient, and one of our stops was Kobe, and we had I think it was in Kobe for 2 days, and so we could afford to take a train up to see Kyoto, and it was packed. Japanese trains are very crowded, at least those that I were on and that I was on. And sitting there in this seat, I was looking down into my viewfinder. My camera was on my lap, and it was kind of pointing a little bit up. And there were people across from me, people across from me in the aisle, people wedged in standing over me. And I caught 4 different expressions. The man reading his newspaper here, the woman looking up, the woman taking a nap while standing, and the woman bored out of it, just gazing out of the window. 4 different souls. And I was able to make this picture by being virtually invisible because the camera was out of sight. It was just tilted up. And I was looking down into it with my the fold out viewfinder. It was critical here. I couldn't have made this picture with a viewfinder that you look at on the back of a camera or through the lens. Tim, anything to add to this?
Oh no, just the one thing I think about too is the trick I use when I do street photography. If I have to use the viewfinder at my eye and I've got somebody coming at me that I want to take the picture of, the trick I use is that I keep looking through the lens finder after I've taken the picture and after they've passed.
Right, right, right. You never stop looking through the viewfinder when you're working a picture.
Right. It's like, and then they don't know for sure whether I was taking a picture of them or not. So, but this picture I really love, especially the woman in the foreground.
Yeah, well, she is emphatic. Her head is about 4 times larger than the other heads.
Right.
Because she's closer to the camera. My vantage point is very close to her. So she becomes the dominant focal point of the image in terms of scale.
Right.
You can relate to her more than you can to, the others are context. They're peripheral. It's really a portrait of her.
Are you going to use, is depth of field one of the topics?
No.
Okay.
No, depth of field is stems from your control of focus, and your control of focus really would be an element of composition. Usually it establishes your background as opposed to your foreground information. And that to me is an element of composition. And okay. I will address that in the module that we have on composition, but thanks for bringing that up.
Because this has got a really kind of amazing depth of field. I mean, they're all, the woman who's asleep is almost soft, but everybody else is quite sharp.
And the reason for that is I'm using an extremely wide angle lens.
Oh, okay.
And wide angle lenses are usually sharp from very close to very far.
Ah, okay.
Oops, bring this over. There we go. Now we're shooting straight up. This is a staircase in the monastery in Melk, M-E-L-K, Austria. It's on the Danube River. We were taking a river cruise. We went up, we toured the monastery, and our guide took us into the stairwell. And I was astonished when I looked up, because the architect designed it as a tribute to the sun. I mean, obviously it's a sphere up here, and the rays of the sun become snail-like as they unfold. And here's the railing, and again, a wide angle lens in close to that railing. And then it embraces everything. And I'm basically holding the camera down around my waist and looking down into the viewfinder. and making sure that everything is in place. I have difficulty holding a camera up to my eye and tilting my head back because at this stage in my life, I would get dizzy. This is not the way I can function in my 80s. Back in my 30s, I could have done that. So this is why, again, having a fold-out viewfinder is critical in Vantage Point, because it enables you, if you're unable to tilt your head back or bend or kneel or lie, you can do that with that fold-out viewfinder. Anything to add to this one, Tim?
Well, it's, you know, the looking up the circular staircase is a fairly common motif, but for me, this one, because of the architecture and the pattern, it stands out. It's a stunning one.
And I also left it in warm color. This was lit by incandescent lighting, and when I made this picture, it came out very goldish. And when I corrected the picture, it went back to its natural kind of blah color, and I kept the warmish color because of its drama.
Mm-hmm.
You and I were visiting a swimming pool in Los Angeles. It was a Art Deco 1920s swimming pool. And once again, you know, to make a picture of the pool itself is one thing, but to bring it into its context and make you feel as if you are there and deal, you know, with a composition, you know, create a composition. And we'll talk about this more when I get to composition. This pool has a lovely reflection in it. We're looking into the water, but the most important thing is its relationship to where I'm standing, where I choose my vantage point. I'm up high and dry, and you can see the steps upon which I stand. And you can see the way that light and shadow play on it. And then you step down and you're into the pool area, and you see the lines leading out of the frame. And what happens here is that you get the duality of being in two places at once. You're on the steps, but you're also being thrust towards the pool. And the whole picture becomes one because of where I stand. Tim, anything to add to this?
I think, again, what your Vantage Point has done for me is the joy of swimming, the joy of pools, and the fact that virtually everything, with the exception of the curved stair banister, is angular and straight and lines. Whereas because of the reflections and the color in the water, it's the antithesis of all those lines. It's the joy of being in the water. And
yes. This is very abstract.
Right.
And this is very defined.
Right.
And of course, a lot of this is the work of the architect that put in this curved railing and related the strong diagonals and the long what I call the verticals in this picture, but they would be horizontals to the architect. He or she is creating a geometric pattern here, a venue for swimming. And I take a position on the stairway. I don't go down and stand next to the pool to get the shot, to get the reflection. I wanted the reflection, but I put the reflection within a context of geometry that the architect of the pool created by choosing this vantage point up on the stairs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think you were with me here. We were visiting my daughter who lived in New York at the time, on Lexington Avenue, and we went up to the roof, and we were shooting down the alley back of the the building where she lived. And the first thing that I saw were the lines and the arrows, well worn, leading into the parking area of the building behind the building that we were standing upon. And I anchored the picture with this series of steps, or stepped, a wall that was arranged in steps with the yellow line leading out. But the picture didn't work for me because it was just pure geometry. And I waited and waited, and suddenly a fellow came out of the building that we were in and started walking down the alley. And this to me seemed a perfect way to establish an image that dealt with choices. Because I choose to make the picture from above, shooting down. And when you are going this way or that way, you choose to go this way or that way. This fellow has to choose where he's going. It's all about choices. As the essence of Vantage Point is all about choices, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You were with me here, remember?
Yes, I have a very similar image, as a matter of fact. Side by side.
That's right. I'm also high looking down in the this was a fort, an old Indian fort in Jaipur. And it was a very famous holiday known as Holi, H-O-L-I, where they throw colored powder on people, and then they throw water, and everybody is covered in different colors. And in this case, they've decorated one of the ceremonial elephants that moves back and forth along this wall. And to get the most out of this picture, or out of this subject, which is the coloration on the trunk and on the ears, and the placement of the elephant walking along through this ancient fort, I climbed up and up and up and shot down and waited for an elephant to enter my frame and make this picture. I could not have made this picture from any other position, because you would not be able to see the relationship of the elephant to the fort and the decoration on the elephant's trunk at the same time without this high vantage point. You don't just choose a vantage point to make a picture different or interesting. Those are two words that I've heard people often use to describe what they were doing. Oh, I took this vantage point because it's an interesting vantage point, or it's a different vantage point. I want to know why you're there, what you're trying to say, what you're trying to express. And that's the important decision we make in choosing a vantage point. Not that it's different or interesting, but that it says something. And this says something about the holiday of Holi. It's a decorative. You decorate yourself, you decorate your elephant. It's a beautiful, colorful, and decorative holiday. Tim, anything to add to this?
Move your cursor, but
Thank you for reminding me.
but yeah, the interesting thing to me in terms of color is how the elephant rider is not colorful. It's more like the focus of the color is on the elephant. It would have been interesting to get this one also from the very low vantage point of this colorful trunk coming at you, but that was probably not possible without getting.
I don't think they allowed tourists on that level because of the elephants walking. There were several elephants moving around the perimeter of the fort, and they didn't want tourists to get trampled.
Yes, I agree. Which brings the point, as you're moving around for your vantage point, be careful about where the edge of the cliff is. Well, thanks again for sharing. It has been very interesting.